By the time we reached sublevel R, the corridor was already under lockdown lights. No sirens, just that flat, clinical glow. The R7 door filled the end of the hall like a bunker face, stenciled black and clean. My teammate had the handheld sensor pressed to the steel. The screen didn't flicker or drift. It held one reading, steady as a heartbeat. An immobile presence 30 centimeters beyond the bulkhead. No thermal, no sound, no movement, just there. We followed protocol. I ran the tamper tape across the latch and stamped it, sealed. Then my radio clicked and a voice I didn't recognize cut through, calm and distant. HQ orders entry. Execute now. No one on site would sign. I looked at the seal, then at the door. Request visual proof, I said. Negative, HQ replied. Proceed. And that's when the metal began to carry a noise that wasn't in the air. This channel documents frontline accounts like this one. Subscribe for future reports. Before that night, R7 was just a designation on a map, one of the restricted partitions beneath the Los Alamos complex, used for sealed storage and controlled experiments. In 2001, I was attached to a small U.S. Army security detachment assigned to internal response. Breaches, leaks, missing personnel, anything that required containment before civilians or contractors ever knew it happened. We worked in pairs, moved with a checklist, and spoke in short confirmations because everything was recorded. At Aero 207, the facility lost power for 42 seconds. When the generators caught, an internal breach alarm tripped on the sublevel R access trunk. The camera feeds showed nothing but empty corridors and a single door status change. R7 flagged unlatched for less than 3 seconds, then returned to locked. No authorized entry logged. No maintenance ticket. No personnel badge read. They called us because the system said the door had been touched. We approached R7 on a slow, measured pace, the way you move when you don't want your own body to become a variable. The corridor was wider than most sublevels, built like a service tunnel for heavy equipment. Conduit runs hugged the ceiling. A single caged light buzzed above the door, throwing a hard cone across the steel. My partner, Ruiz, set the handheld sensor against the bulkhead seam. I watched his face tighten the way it does when the readout matches what you don't want it to match. He shifted it left, then right, checking for a bad angle. The reading stayed pinned. Confirm, I said. Confirmed, he answered. Still, same distance. I keyed my radio. Control, this is Team 2. We have a persistent contact behind R7. No movement. Control came back fast. Stand by. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Normally you get a checklist, a supervisor, a clear lane. Instead, we got silence, then overlapping voices like someone had patched multiple nets together without telling us. A local duty officer broke in. Maintain seal. No entry until hazmat arrives. A second voice followed immediately. Higher, colder. HQ orders entry. Execute now. We froze. Ruiz looked at me, then at the latch we'd just sealed. 2 different authorities, 2 different priorities. The kind of split that makes good soldiers hesitate because there is no correct move, only a move that becomes yours. I forced a read back, the way we're trained. HQ, repeat order, entry through R7 without visual confirmation. Affirm, HQ said. Proceed, time sensitive. Local control snapped back. Negative, do not compromise the seal. I asked the question that mattered. Who holds entry authority for sublevel R? No one answered cleanly. There was a pause, just enough to tell me they were looking at a chart or deciding who would carry the weight if this went wrong. Ruiz stepped closer to the door. He didn't touch it. He didn't want the record to show he'd initiated anything beyond observation. He pressed the sensor again, then swapped to a second unit from his pouch. Same result. Then he did something I didn't like. He set his gloved palm flat against the steel for a half second, like a man testing if a freezer door is cold. You feel anything? I asked. He shook his head. Nothing. But the reading's stronger here. I should have told him to stop. Instead, I took one step forward and listened. At first, there was nothing but our breathing and the soft hiss of the flashlight beam cutting through dust. Then I heard it. Not through the air, but through the metal, a constant, fine grit vibration, like a distant engine idling behind a wall. It wasn't loud. It was steady, uniform, and it didn't change when Ruiz stepped back. "Control," I said. "We've got a persistent mechanical noise through the door. No airborne source." Local control responded, strained. "Copy. Do not touch the bulkhead." HQ cut in. "Noise is irrelevant. Execute entry." I looked at the seal tape stretched across the latch. It suddenly felt less like a safeguard and more like a line on a form, something that existed to prove someone had followed steps, not something that would stop what was on the other side. Ruiz lowered his voice. "What's the play?" "The play is, we do not get blamed," I said, because that's what it was turning into. "We need written authority. We didn't have email. Not down there. Everything was radio and record. So I did the only thing I could. I demanded a named order. HQ, identify the authorizing officer," I said. "Say it for the log." The response came a few seconds later, clipped. "Authorization will be handled. Proceed." That told me everything. They wanted the action, but not the signature. The corridor camera above the door clicked as it panned a few degrees, tracking us. It hadn't moved since we arrived. I noticed because I'd been trained to notice. The lens settled, stopped, then adjusted again. Tiny corrections like a living thing trying to focus. Ruiz noticed it too. That camera wasn't on earlier. I scanned upward. The indicator light was dim, almost dead. Yet the motor moved. "Control," I said. "Confirm CCTV status in our corridor." No answer. Just static that wasn't static. An even, unbroken tone riding under the carrier. The same kind of sound you hear when an old handset is off the hook somewhere in a building, except we were sealed underground, and nothing should have been open. Ruiz glanced at the radio in my hand like he didn't trust it anymore. "Is that us?" I toggled channels. The tone stayed. It was then that the sensor did something it hadn't done before. The Immobile reading didn't shift. It didn't spike. It didn't wander. It simply duplicated. 2 identical contacts, same distance, same strength, as if the presence behind the door had been stamped twice on the map. Ruiz stared at the screen, then at the door. "That's not possible." I keyed up, forcing my voice steady. "Control, we now have 2 persistent immobile contacts behind R7. Request guidance." Local control finally came back, voice low. "Hold position. Do not breach. Await." HQ stepped over him, sharp. "Proceed with entry. That's an order." Ruiz looked at the seal again, then at me. The door didn't move. The corridor didn't change. The noise through the metal stayed perfectly constant. But the chain of command was collapsing in real time, and the longer we stood there, the more it felt like R7 wasn't the thing trapping us. It was the protocol. HQ didn't repeat the order a 3rd time. They didn't need to. The recorder was live, the corridor camera was tracking, and the net was contaminated with that steady tone, like the building itself had found a way onto our channel. Ruiz pulled the bolt cutters from his kit and held them up without touching the seal. A silent question. I nodded once, but my stomach tightened as if I'd just signed something with my own hands. "Control," I said, forcing procedure back into the moment. "HQ has ordered entry. Confirm local acknowledgement for the log." Local control answered, quiet and cornered. "Acknowledged. Entry not recommended." That was as close to permission as we were going to get. Ruiz cut the tamper tape. The snap was small, but it echoed. The instant the seal broke, the noise in the metal sharpened. Still constant, still uniform, but closer, as if the door had become a speaker. I put my hand on the wheel handle. The steel was cold in a way that didn't fit the corridor temperature, like the door had been sitting in shade even under light. I turned. The mechanism resisted, then gave with a heavy click. "HQ," I said. "No visual proof. Confirm proceed." "Proceed," they replied. "Open and report." Ruiz braced to the side, flashlight angled tight on the seam. I cracked the door a fraction, no more than the width of 2 fingers. There was no rush of air, no smell, no heat shift. Just emptiness so flat it felt engineered. Then Ruiz's light caught something that shouldn't have been there. A shadow line, perfectly still, pressed close to the inner face of the bulkhead as if something was standing on the other side with its weight leaned in. But the gap was too small to see shape, only proximity. The sensor chirped once. The Immobile reading didn't change distance. It simply locked harder, as if the device had finally decided it could trust itself. Ruiz whispered, "It's right there." In my headset, the steady tone dropped out for half a second. Silence so clean it made my ears ring, then came back louder, riding the channel like a voice trying to form words without lungs. I didn't open further. I couldn't justify it without proof and without a name attached to the order. I held the door in that narrow gap, feeling a faint vibration through the wheel handle, steady as a motor that never needed fuel. "Halt," I said into the radio. "Entry initiated. Contact confirmed at the seam." "Open fully," HQ replied. Ruiz looked at me like he already knew I wouldn't. And behind the door, something stayed perfectly, impossibly still, close enough to touch if we committed to the breach. We held that two-finger gap for maybe 10 seconds, maybe a minute. Time gets unreliable when every part of you is waiting for something to move, and it doesn't. Ruiz kept the light fixed on the seam until his hand started to shake. "Halt breach," local control said suddenly. "Seal and withdraw. Decon is standing up." HQ cut in over him, clipped and angry. "Negative. Open fully and clear the compartment." I didn't answer either of them. I answered the only thing that mattered, the door. I rotated the wheel back and eased the bulkhead shut without letting it swing. The moment the latch seated, the vibration in the handle stopped. Too clean, too immediate, like a switch had been flipped on the other side. Ruiz slapped a fresh strip of tamper tape across the latch. His stamp hit the steel twice before it landed straight. Sealed. He checked the sensor again. "Contacts still there, same distance." I keyed the radio. R7 resealed. Entry aborted. Contact confirmed. "Request instructions." Silence. Then a new voice. Higher rank, colder tone. "Team 2, withdraw to Decon. Do not discuss net traffic. Logs will be pulled." We backed down the corridor and kept our eyes off the camera housings. At the checkpoint, Decon met us before we reached the surface. They were already suited up when we arrived, as if we were contaminated before we ever spoke. They started the rinse and strip procedure while we were still in full kit, like we'd come out of a hot zone, except we hadn't gone anywhere. Nobody asked what we saw. Nobody asked why the seal had been cut. A technician just held out a clipboard with an authorization line already printed and a signature space left blank. "Who's signing?" Ruiz asked. The tech didn't look up. "Not you." By morning, R7 was no longer on our access roster. The corridor was blocked with temporary barriers and a new placard that didn't use the word restricted. It used decommissioned. The incident report we filed came back stamped with a different case number and half the fields redacted, including the section for authorizing officer. The audio from our radios was requested, then lost during transfer. Ruiz tried to pull the CCTV feed and got a denial notice signed by no one. Weeks later, I checked the maintenance log once. R7 still showed sealed. The sensor contact never cleared.